Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about the Bombay High Court judge who last week, in a controversial order, acquitted a man accused of sexually assaulting a 12-year-old girl. We also talk about the government's decision on the NRC, that is the National Register of Citizens. But first, we talk about the farmers' protests. On Monday, while the Union Budget 2021 was being announced, a number of measures came into effect to deter farmers' protests from taking place. This included security being ramped up, protest sites being fortified, and over 100 Twitter accounts being temporarily frozen. In this segment, we first speak to Sukrita Barua, who has been covering the farmers' protests for the Indian Express, about the changes that have been happening at the protest sites.
Right. So, right from the very beginning of the protests, these protests are taking place at Delhi's borders. And in all three sites, the farmers are on the other side of the border. So, say in Tikri, they're on the Haryana side. At Singhu, too, they're on the Haryana side. And they're separated from Delhi by these thick layers of barricading. And right from the start, at all sites, there's been heavy layers of metal barricades to separate them from the capital. But since January 26th, we've seen 10 situations at all the sites with alleged locals turning up and protesting against the protest. So there's been a fair amount of tension at all the sites. And the level at which the security arrangements have been ramping up at the sites, all of them have basically become fortresses. And the reinforcements are all on the Delhi side, ostensibly to prevent the protesters from being able to make their way in.
She says that the defining visual of Monday was the sight of iron nails being embedded into roads and national highways of Delhi, positioned in a way to puncture the tires of vehicles coming in from Haryana. One of the first places where these nails came up was at Tikri.
So I can describe what Tikri was like on Monday because I was there, and there were just layers after layers of barricading that were happening. So like I told you, right from the start, there have been heavy layers of metal barricading separating the farmers from Delhi. Yesterday there were two such heavy layers, and after that there was this one layer of massive stone boulders, like just massive rocks which were taller than I am, a big layer of that. And right behind that was the layer of these iron nails. And there were like around 350 of large iron nails, which are around half a foot tall. And then there were several, like around 5, 6 times the number of those of smaller nails, which are about the size of like my finger, which were placed at an angle which is pointing towards incoming vehicles. So if a vehicle drives towards them, their tires will be punctured. And then behind this nail layer, there was a layer of concrete barricades. And behind that, a few layers later, was another layer of those massive stone boulders that I was talking about. And then a few layers behind that was another layer of concrete boulders. So this is just at one side. This is just the material reinforcements. Of course, large number of police and other forces which are present at all times at these sites.
Similar arrangements, she says, have also been made at two other protest sites, that is, at Ghazipur and Singhu. At Singhu, which has been the epicenter of the protests for some time now, there she says roads have also been dug up.
Both at Ghazipur and Singhu, we've actually seen that on January 26th, something we had seen was protesters were able to push barricades out of the way, including concrete barricades. So what they're doing at these sites is that they're pouring cement between these concrete barricades so that these are being completely attached to the road. So they're becoming a permanent material part of the national highways. Just these barricades are being melded into the road. So these are the kind of material reinforcements we're seeing at both Ghazipur and Singhu. We're seeing concertina wires, barbed wires being put on top of barricades. So a complete like militarization of these three protest sites.
Officials say that this is being done because the situation is tense and to prevent the kind of movement and chaos that took place on the Republic Day. In fact, when addressing reporters yesterday, Delhi Police Commissioner S.N. Srivastava said that he was surprised that fewer questions were raised on the violent events of January 26, when policemen were attacked and barricades broken by the protesters. Meanwhile, Farmers are claiming that these warlike preparations are an attempt to scare protesters away and turn locals against them.
The basic messaging that there is in protest sites is that we're not scared of these kind of security arrangements, because they've made it very clear and they continue to say that they are going to continue remaining here. And they are trying to reinforce the message that they are here to protest in a disciplined and peaceful way, and they reinforce that is the strength of their protest. So what they try to reinforce time and again at the protest sites is that they're not going to be provoked by these kind of arrangements, and they're not scared of it either, is the messaging that is being put out at the protest sites.
Another thing that happened on Monday was that the Punjab mail that usually halts at New Delhi for 20 minutes was instead routed via Haryana. The railways called it an operational necessity, but protesters said that it was done to prevent farmers from reaching Delhi. In line with this, another train headed for Old Delhi was short terminated at Bahadurgarh in Haryana. Now, the other thing that happened on Monday related to the protests was that over 100 Twitter accounts that were seen as being sympathetic to the farmers' protests were temporarily frozen. Karishma Mehrotra, who reports on the intersection of technology and politics, talks about these accounts and why they were frozen.
So it seems like from what we've learned that the initial order, it was initiated by the Home Ministry, the Home Affairs Ministry, and they had asked the IT Ministry to remove or take down roughly 100 Twitter accounts and 150 tweets. Now, from the information we learned, these tweets were related to a particular hashtag called hashtag Modi planning farmer genocide. And so the IT Ministry asked Twitter to remove the tweets off of the platform. So some of the handles that we know of, which were temporarily suspended, was the Bharatiya Kisan Union, the Caravan, the Prasar Bharati CEO, an Aam Aadmi Party MLA, an activist, an actor. So there was quite a few different accounts that were affected by this. However, what happened was there was a meeting between Twitter and the IT Ministry on Monday evening. In this meeting, it seems like Twitter tried to push back against the order, arguing that the content was free speech and it was newsworthy. What happened after that meeting is a bit unclear, but we do know that sometime after the meeting, late in the evening, the accounts were reactivated back onto the platform. And Twitter was, stating that the order was an interim order. So it's unclear exactly how the reactivation transpired, but we do know that the IT Ministry had asked Twitter to take down these accounts related to the farmers' protests. One other thing that Twitter had also described was that they had withheld the accounts under their, quote, country withheld content policy. So that policy is in regards to a valid legal request from the government.
And do we know whether all of these accounts were using that hashtag you mentioned, Modi planning farmer genocide?
It seems anecdotally, at least speaking to some of them, that they didn't use that hashtag. So just looking at what was affected, it doesn't seem to only revolve around that hashtag. Perhaps that hashtag is what further initiated the order, or it's what triggered the order. And I will say, speaking to the government source in the ministry, that they were quite fixated on the idea of people discussing Modi planning a genocide, and that his belief was that that should not be allowed and we can't accept that on the platform. So from the government perspective, it seems like there was quite a bit of focus on that particular hashtag. But when we look at the accounts and when we speak to the people who were affected, they don't seem to, all of them, have much to do with the hashtag.
And how common or uncommon is something like this to happen for Twitter to temporarily freeze accounts based on the government's request?
I mean, the act itself of taking down content due to a government request, all the platforms do this. And there is a transparency report that comes out every year that describes how many times they've done it. I will say Twitter doesn't do it as often as, say, Facebook, both in India and globally. Partly that's because it's a smaller platform. It's a little bit has less of a reach in India. But also there is reputation that Twitter has cultivated in recent years around the idea of fighting against sort of government orders of this sort. However, we're in a very limbo phase, because if you're also watching the US, what happened there was that Twitter was more proactive than Facebook in taking down Trump's content or flagging Trump's content or taking down his account. So over that period of time and leading up to that time, Twitter has also created a name for itself of taking down content that could be inciting violence of any sort. So it is something that, I think the companies are still figuring out, the government is still figuring out, but this is not the first time this has happened. Although the unprecedented nature of this perhaps is that we did see some amount of this during the CAA time as well. This was a larger sweep than what we saw in the CAA time. I don't think we saw anything as bulk in one sort of day. That time was the first steps towards this. So, that was also the first time that we saw an internet shutdown in Delhi, was during the anti-CAA protests. And now this time we're seeing another internet shutdown had happened on Republic Day in certain parts of Delhi. And we've also seen a continuation of internet shutdown orders in certain districts in Haryana. So overall, it's clear that some of these tactics that the government has used before, they've used again, and they've also extended some of them further.
A quick warning before we begin this next segment: the discussion contains descriptions of sexual violence. And next, we talk about the Bombay High Court. Last week, in one of our episodes, we talked about a controversial order that was passed by a Bombay High Court judge named Pushpa Ganediwala. In her judgment, she had acquitted a man who was accused of sexually assaulting a 12-year-old girl under the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, also called the POCSO Act. Now, following this controversy, the Supreme Court Collegium has decided to intervene and is set to withdraw its recommendation to appoint her as a permanent judge of the court. In this segment, we talk to Apurva Vishwanath, who covers law for the Indian Express, about this decision. Apurva, last week we had talked about this controversial order that was passed by the Nagpur bench of the Bombay High Court. It was a single-judge bench comprising of Justice Pushpa Ganediwala. In the judgment, she had acquitted a man of sexual assault on the grounds that essentially groping a child over her clothes does not constitute as sexual assault under the POCSO Act, basically saying that this offense is not serious enough to be considered sexual assault, and felt that this person should instead be punished under less serious offenses. And since POCSO has a mandatory sentence of 3 years, the man instead was charged for outraging the modesty of a woman, the sentence for which is 1 year. Now, since then, we have come to know more about the judge and, similar judgments that she has made in the past. So could you talk about what all we have learned since then?
So first thing is that after the verdict drew so much flack, the Attorney General of India mentioned it before a bench headed by the Chief Justice of India. So the Attorney General of India has the right to audience before any court in India. So it was not that he filed a petition. He orally mentioned it before the judge and said that this is a really bad precedent and it needs to be set aside. So it can't be operationalized. So Chief Justice of India also, who at that time was already aware of the judgment, it seemed from the conversation in court, this judgment had caught the attention of the chief as well. So the judgment was immediately stayed, and the Attorney General was asked to file a case subsequently, but immediately the case was stayed. However, more rulings of this judge from even before and especially on POCSO were highlighted subsequently. So in these cases as well, the problematic aspect was the judge's very restrictive interpretation of what constitutes sexual assault. Similarly, the judge had let off people from the POCSO Act, from the stringent provisions of POCSO Act, and convicted them under IPC, which carry lesser minimum sentences, interpreting sexual assault in very restrictive ways. So this really caused a furor. And incidentally, um, Justice Pushpa Ganeriwala has been an additional judge of the Bombay High Court for 2 years, and her tenure ends in February. So her promotion was actually being deliberated by the Supreme Court Collegium at around the same time. And the Supreme Court Collegium, which comprises of the Chief Justice and two other senior most judges of the court, that is Justice N.V. Ramana and Rohinton Fallinariman. So these three judges had taken a view to elevate her as a permanent judge of the Bombay High Court. But the outrage that followed her rulings essentially cost her her promotion. And now the court is taking a relook at this.
And what kind of things did this collegium consider when making this decision?
So unfortunately, deliberations of the collegium are not public documents. They are not made out. And the court has insisted that a holistic view is taken of the candidate. So the court doesn't look into just one aspect, or for example, their judicial track record, or something like that. The court says that a holistic view is taken. So we really don't know what are the reasons that weighed in favor of Justice Pushpa Ganeriwala. But what we know is that she has been in the lower judiciary, in the state judicial services for about 10 years before she was elevated as an additional judge of the Bombay High Court. Additional judgeship is essentially a probationary judgeship. In the constitution, it is envisaged when the pendency of a high court increases and you need more judges temporarily to deal with the amount of work. But over time, additional judgeship has become the go-to appointment model because, as we know in our constitution, the only way to remove a judge from his office of a constitutional court is through impeachment. And that's a really high bar. You need the parliament to sign off on it. So instead of that, what the Supreme Court Collegium has been preferring to do is to appoint judges as additional judges who have a tenure of 2 years. And then, depending on their performance, the tenure is either extended or they're made permanent judges. And once they're made permanent judges, the age of retirement is 62 and they continue till that age. So Justice Pushpa Ganeriwala also was appointed initially for a tenure of 2 years. And in February, that tenure is coming to an end. So her file was being considered by the Supreme Court Collegium. However, the Indian Express has learned that there were two strong notes of dissent from consultee judges. The Collegium also follows this method of, while making a recommendation, they take the views of consultee judges as they are referred to. Now, consultee judges are senior judges of the Supreme Court who are familiar with the affairs of the particular High Court. For example, in this case, for the Bombay High Court, where Justice Pushpa comes from, you have Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, whose parent High Court is the Bombay High Court, and Justice Khanvilkar, who also comes from the Bombay High Court. So these two judges given their opinion on a particular candidate. And it is learned that this time Justice Chandrachud and Khanvilkar sent two very strong notes of dissent, saying that based on these POCSO judgments, they cited 3 POCSO judgments, all 3 of them relating to the interpretation of sexual assault under Section 7 of the POCSO Act, and said that the judgments are so bad in its reasoning that this judge should not be made a permanent judge immediately.
So what do we know about what happens with her now, now that we're saying that she won't be made into a permanent judge?
So when a judge is not made a permanent judge, there are pretty much 2 routes that follow. One is an extension is given for their additional judgeship. That could be 1 year, 6 months, as the collegium deems fit. The other one is to let them demit office. Demitting office is simpler when you are elevated as a judge from the bar directly. That is, if you were in practice and you've been elevated as a judge, when you demit office, you go back to your practice. But if this is an elevation from the lower judiciary, as is the case with Justice Pushpa Ganeriwala, you have to go back to your cadre, that is as a district judge. So that is essentially a demotion. So that's a very rare case, and we've had very few instances of High Court judges who've gone back as district judges because they were not made permanent. So with Justice Pushpa Ganeriwala, it's a tricky situation now, and the collegium has 2 options before it. One is to give her an extension and continue her additional judgeship for some time, and then again take a fresh call on whether she should be made a permanent judge or not. And the second one is, of course, to send her back to her state judicial services cadre. But also the Indian Express has learned that this collegium is more likely to take the lenient view of giving her an extension and taking a call subsequently on whether she should be made a permanent judge or not.
If you would like to know more about this case, do check out our episode called Why Bombay High Court Acquitted a Man of Sexual Assault Under the POCSO Act. In it, we talk about the controversial judgment in detail and discuss the problem with mandatory sentencing. We have provided a link to it in today's episode description. And in the end, we talk about the National Register of Citizens, or NRC. In response to a parliamentary standing committee, the Ministry of Home Affairs has reiterated that no decision has been taken to conduct a nationwide NRC. Responding to fears about the upcoming census exercise and the National Population Register updation, the government said, quote, all individual level information collected in census are confidential. In census, only aggregated data are released at various administrative levels. Like the earlier censuses, wide publicity measures would be taken up for creating proper awareness among public so as to conduct and complete the Census 2021 successfully, unquote. It also added that till now, no decision has been taken to create the National Register of Indian Citizens. The committee, which is headed by Congress MP Anand Sharma, had in February last year observed that there is a lot of dissatisfaction and fear among people regarding the upcoming NPR and census. Back in late 2019 and early 2020, widespread protests had taken place against the NRC and the Citizenship Amendment Act, following which several states had said that they would not implement the NPR exercise. You were listening to Three Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and as always was edited and mixed by our producer, Joshua Thomas. If you like this show, then you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.